theme, if you ain't guessed it already, is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And whew, we're gonna go there. We're gonna go there. We're gonna talk it out.
Let's go there.
Get a little political a little bit, but
I'm ready.
it's necessary, and I feel like as leaders, as change agents,
Come on now.
this is the place where we discuss these things and formulate actions on that. Because I won't lie, this year I feel a little. It's hard to be excited about 4th of July, especially as I grow and mature a little bit and really see what's going on in these streets. And so that's where I kind of landed in this place of American patriotism as a civil religion. And talking about this thing. And I'll put in a brief, I'll kind of outline a little bit. This was from a paper actually that I wrote in 2016 for religious studies class that I was in. And so this is what I wrote. I said, although the United States uses separation of church and state model, elements of patriotism from an outsider's perspective does display similarities to religion. And so, they have their sacred ancestors, such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. We know all of these things. Yes. But in the American construct of this civil religion, they would be these sacred ancestors.
Of course.
And so forth. And, we celebrate these holidays and do these certain rituals, like fireworks on 4th of July, and all of these things, observance of presidential birthdays, memorial days, and things like that. So Americans also have sacred symbols and text and artifacts, such as the American flag, the bald eagle, the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, which we're going to look at today, monuments and so forth. But the most important religious reference in American patriotism is the unifying values, supposedly unifying values that bind all Americans together. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And these elements help to form a civil religion of the United States. Yeah. So looking at that in that framework, like looking at these things that the United States holds near and dear, we have to look at it.
Amen.
We have to look at it and we have to evaluate it, and our movement's theme this year is accountable. So if we hold ourselves as a movement accountable to what it is that we say we believe, in that broader context, that we should also hold the nation accountable to what it says it believes.
Amen.
So I was looking at it, this Declaration of Independence that was, I think it was voted on today. It was presented, I think, on the 2nd of July, which was yesterday, and then voted on actually the 4th, which is tomorrow, which is why we celebrate 4th of July when we do. We have to hold America accountable.
Come on now.
To what it is that America says they believe. And I draw inspiration from our What We Believe statement, also a sacred text.
Amen.
That we believe that the Bible and all great spiritual writings or guides must be read, taken into consideration the time of the writing, traditions practiced at that time, and the fact that we have the right to question and examine all interpretation.
I see where you're going. I like it.
See where we're going with this thing today?
I like it.
So we know that in relation to the Declaration of Independence, the traditions at that time, especially for black and brown people, especially for women, especially for anybody outside of the WASP aspect, which is white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant males, that was at the traditions at that time when this was written is not true today, which is why we need to further examine what was written by these American ancestors and hold the people that follow it accountable. They say, when we know better, we do better.
Amen.
We all know better, but are we actually doing better? So I want to start off with, what is your definition of freedom?
That's heavy.
Let's have you just take a moment here and think about it. What does freedom mean to you?
I don't know. As soon as you said that, I thought about the context of America, or what's considered democracy, freedom within it, where we're free to do what we want as long as it does not harm public safety. And so, in the context of freedom, you give up some rights for safety. So I guess for me, freedom would be the freedom to do what I want as long as it doesn't harm another. But also having people around me free to do what they would like as long as it doesn't harm the British society. So being able to do what you want, but still taking into account that you're not the only person in the entire United States.
I like that because I think I'm fairly similar, and I was like, for me, freedom is a right to choose.
Like that.
So I can make choices for my life, of course, that don't harm others, hopefully that don't harm myself. And everyone else has that same right to make choices for their life. Whether I agree with it or not, it doesn't matter, but it is your right to choose. And I
That's
believe
the
that
key.
everyone should have that freedom to do that.
Amen.
I know
Mm.
you said the right to do as long as it doesn't harm yourself. Funny, self-harm is not illegal. As funny as that is.
Mm.
It is in the military.
Okay, military is an institution.
In the military, they consider the property of the government.
Oh,
So if you're harming yourself, then you're harming the property of the
you're
government.
charged with destruction of public property.
If you survive it, you'll be court-martialed.
Wow.
That's got to be just
You would hurt yourself in the military.
right. And then, since you're going there, our current government and many governments before that thought that women and other folks who can have give birth have no autonomy over their body because they don't have the right to choose not to have a baby. And the crazy part is now, I believe that those folks should have the right to choose at any time, but now they're even drawing it down to where they don't have a choice, if it's rape or molestation, or if the baby's gonna come out, stillborn, severely deformed or with serious handicap issues. They're like, no, you're gonna have it, but guess what? Are they gonna take care of it once you
That
have it?
made me think one of those things, and I was listening to something where a woman actually could not get an abortion, even though she was going to give her birth, the child was not going to be alive when she gave birth.
Or in some cases, it could kill the mother.
And it's still, and for me, funny enough, it goes in line with like liberty, the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know,
Unless you're this, that. If you're not heterosexual, cisgender, cishet, white male.
I don't know, since you opened that can of worms,
I was like, yeah.
the attack on the autonomy of women's rights affects women regardless of color.
Right.
And I can't even say birthing people because we haven't seen how it would affect maybe a transgender individual. We haven't seen that yet, and I'd love to see that go to court.
We got a 10-year-old now who, I just read this morning in the New York Times, is a 10-year-old who's having to be transported across state lines. She was molested, she's pregnant, and in the state where she lives, the law says that under no circumstances can she have a baby. So she has to be transported across the line, state lines,
Yeah, and that's
to
very
have an
real.
abortion performed.
It does hurt more women of color than non-people of color.
Because we can't always afford to go across state lines.
Well, no, it's not just that. The mortality rates among women giving birth is like 3 times higher in Black women than it is any other race, which is scary.
And then either reports, you're right, the reports I read say that has nothing to do with the women or the health, it has to do with the biases and the way they're treated by the medical professionals.
Yeah.
It's very real. And that's one of those things, like, we absolutely have to talk about these things. And I was like, I would never take this it definitely needs to stay as a women's rights issue because it's not going to be. I'll speak for me as a trans man. I will never take that away from women to have their voices silenced. I was like, yes, these decisions affect me as well. But women should definitely be the primary focus of this. From a trans masculine perspective, abortions are necessary. Statistically speaking, trans men are more likely to be sexually assaulted. And we hear these cases in a lot of, well, in our closed circles, I hear it a lot. Because, as masculine folks, feel comfortable reporting incidences like those.
Wow.
And even if they are reported, they're not taken seriously. Because, you're supposed to be a man, or I guess you're not really a man, and, all of these narratives. And so, transmasculine folks, gender nonconforming folks, non-binary folks are also affected by all of these things. Because, some of us have birthing bodies. And to already for it to always already be an uncomfortable situation for folks with those identities, just not even having access pushes it even further. So we have to talk about it. We have to hold our nation accountable to what it is that they've adopted to being their belief system.
Can I just say something quick? You had said, asked, what is your definition of freedom? And the first thing that came to my mind were a couple of things. Financial freedom,
Yes.
which in this country is extremely important. If you don't have financial freedom, you can't dictate your life. The government then steps in and says, well, okay, we have a safety net, but then we're going to tell you how to live your life, where you can live, what you can do, how you can do it. We had an issue in my family where my grandmother had saved for many years, but when she started to receive some benefits as a senior, she couldn't have the money in her bank account. Couldn't have more than XYZ dollars in her bank. That was her money that she had saved for many, many years. And they were basically like, you either the money needs to go or you can't start receiving the benefits. Crazy. And then the other freedom is political. I think we need to have political freedom here. I feel like those rights are being, I would say, a couple years ago I would have said slowly being eroded, but now I would say quickly being eroded away. Because you have all these states that have implemented extreme voting rights measures to make it more difficult. And for years I didn't have a big problem with it because I was like, oh, what's the big deal about an ID? But then I started hearing more and more stories about people who have difficulties, especially black and brown folks, again, it's always us, getting legitimate IDs.
Founding documents, and I've never read them. I've never read the Declaration of Independence to see what it was that they were proclaiming. And I read it through, and some parts really resonated with me, and I was like, the boldness, the audacity.
That's why I can't get through it, because you start reading, we hold these truths to be so evident that all men are created equal. I'm about to say, what about women? And when you said men, were you not referring to the men of color?
At this point in time, no.
Right.
But like I said,
And so I never get past like the first
Only
paragraph
white
before I
land
start
owning
talking
men. So
smack.
not even all white men, white land owning men could vote.
and that alienated some of their own. Truthfully, but if we liberate it a little bit, we can actually get into the meat of this thing. And I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but there were some parts that I was like, hey, I can rock with that. And so it says in Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's gods entitled them. They got that old world writing and whatnot, but we're gonna get through it. It says, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the cause which impelled them to the separation. And so it goes in with what our thought of the week was. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, women, and however you choose to identify are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among people, derived of their just powers from the consent of the governed. So we elect these folks, and they're supposed to honor the will of the people. This is what they set forth. This is what they said in 1776 when they said, no more, we cutting ties with Britain. This part I actually really like, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it,
Come on, man.
and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. And so I read this because it is hard to get past that, that all men are created equal, and we know that when they wrote that, that didn't include anybody in this room.
No,
None of us.
No.
But this is what America said they believed in. They said that all people are supposedly equal. They said that we have the rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And if our government of elected officials doesn't uphold these things, we got the right to flip over the table. And so, when I look at this thing, and I thought about it, and I was like, I love Jesus. Because Jesus was in this good troublemaker kind of realm. He was one of these rebellious folks over here that these founding fathers was in. And Jesus often called out the corrupt Pharisees and all of those folks out there, the hypocrites and whatnot of his time. And so I was like, do we need to call out our own American Pharisees?
Come on now.
These people that are supposedly interpreting the law for all people to ensure their rights, happiness in pursuit of happiness and all of these things, the right of choice, but they're falling short. And we're actually going backwards. We're stripping away more and more choices.
And rights.
And at what point do we say in this civil religion that we call, the United States of America and their patriotism, when do we actually act on those things?
So, as you were talking, I started thinking about January 6th, right? And those people who are also American citizens, they believe what you just read, but from their perspective. And they wholly believe they're correct. That's the crazy part. They've been so, there's so many layers to it. Most of them are extremely racist. Most of them are all kinds of things, right? But for them, they're protecting their version of America. And a lot of them are like, we want to go back to, right? But when you talk about going back, in this country, you only need to go back about 50, 60 years.
True.
Well, now maybe 60 years to a time when we had almost no rights, right? So what are they really saying? That's what I'm always challenged with. Why don't you just come out and say it?
Make America great again.
That's what it means.
I know.
When a time when black folks were cordoned off, redlined in certain neighborhoods, couldn't do this, couldn't have certain jobs. I watched the movie with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis. What was that called? It was a famous play, but they made it into a movie. Maybe so.
Yeah.
But he was fighting to get a job as a garbage truck driver. You could pick up the trash and throw it, but you couldn't drive the truck because that was the white man's job. And that wasn't too long ago. That was just a couple years before the two of us were born. So, yeah.
You know what? I should have listened to this because I listen to the news, and from what I hear, apparently WASH feel the most threatened. They feel like they're being erased, or that
The great
America's
replacement theory,
trying
they
to
call
take
it.
away from them. And I can see why that perspective would be, because when you start with all of these rights, and then it's funny, it's always us or them. If it's the us or them theory where we can have all these rights, but they can't also have all these rights, and we still have the same rights, because apparently when you give to someone else, it apparently takes away from someone, which I didn't know if you gave everybody freedom. It took away from other people's freedoms. But that's essentially what they're working on. The more freedoms and rights and wealth
Well, that's a big part of it.
wealth that these other groups amass, the more they feel like they're being taken away from. When last I checked the Forbes list, like 90% of it was white men.
But I believe what you said, Dean Torres. I believe that there's room in this country, being the wealthiest nation in the world, next to Germany, being as wealthy as we are, there's you talk about limitless liberation, there are limitless resources here. There's enough for every black, brown, white, red, and yellow person to live a good life. Not everybody will have a mansion, not everybody will have a whatever, Rolls Royce or whatever. But every person in this country could live an above average lifestyle, and then it wouldn't take anything away from anyone else. So then what really is the problem?
Say when we're looking to address the issues of the nation, the issues that we're having, and like I said, I struggle with this idea of Independence Day on tomorrow, because for the majority of us in here, if you know your lineage, you know we wasn't free. I know my folks wasn't free. I know they were in the Carolinas and I believe in Georgia, working for free. They might have had the day off because Boss Man was going to have a barbecue, but I'm pretty sure they was cooking at the barbecue.
Yeah.
And serving them
And
first.
serving them first.
And then the ears, the tail, and the feet.
And all of that, and God bless our people, we can make it work, because yes, I celebrate the seasoning on tomorrow. I celebrate, yes, but it's a difficult day. Question wasn't on here. What is everyone's thoughts now? Because what has it been, about 2 years now that Juneteenth has been recognized as a federal holiday?
We at church, so I can't say the words.
There's other words you can
There's
substitute.
I know, but I'm talking to the good deacon Teresa, so we know the words I like to use. Juneteenth as a federal holiday, I think that.
Maybe I should have posed that question.
I don't have a problem with Juneteenth as a holiday. I have a problem with the people who don't want the true history of this country to be taught. So we have a president that came in and said, okay, we can make Juneteenth a holiday. Great, fantastic. But you have legislation passed in the majority of our states now where they can't teach true history. And we're not even talking about CRT. Because for the record, critical race theory is only taught at the university level. It's not even,
I'm not, Juneteenth as a federal holiday, it means about as much to me as July 4th as a federal holiday. Because as far as I am concerned, the concept of America as it was meant to be is not realistic. For me, anytime a woman can't choose what to do with her body, that throws out all the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness I've seen. Anytime we still don't recognize that generational wealth has been stripped from black people. Stripped. Because it's not even the fact that we didn't have access to it. When we did have it, it was taken from us. For me, these are just and I do real estate, so I ain't got no days off no way. And if I am gonna take a day off, it ain't gonna be for these non-realistic celebrations, these sham, these days that people so-called. You can't tell me you celebrate life, liberty, and you can't tell me you honor the flag when you watch those people run up in the Capitol on June 6th, and everybody around the world was like, y'all want, when you don't shoot us, like you don't shoot them. When the NRA stands up for people like Philando Castillo, who was who had a firearm and a license to do so.
Right.
But you heard nothing from the NRA.
Right.
Like it can't be one without the other. And for me, Juneteenth as a federal holiday means about as much as July 4th on a federal holiday. Absolutely nothing. Not when I see and I watch the concept of not just generational wealth, but lack of education about finances within our community. And it's not because people don't want to know, it's because we haven't found a way to teach them. There's inequality in the school system. I told y'all where we live, the kids, they choose who goes to certain schools based on how much money your district gives. But all your houses are like $100,000 cheaper than the houses in the good neighborhoods. So those kids get more tax money. So those kids get more spots. And this is what they do to each other. So what are they doing to us? So no, I have no respect for Juneteenth as a federal holiday. We still ain't free. We just free-ish.
Yeah, somebody got a t-shirt like that. I saw that.
So, no, I'm not here for Juneteenth or a Juneteenth ice cream or a Juneteenth t-shirts. I'm not here for any of that. I'll just say
I
that.
like my Juneteenth t-shirt.
I'm
My
glad
issue with
I hope it's a free-ish.
my issue with that, I think my biggest issue, and that's with everything that is new and exciting and suddenly nationally recognized, is that it becomes opportunity for commercialism.
Yeah.
Y'all, I was hot. Like, I had burned up all my biscuits on Walmart's website,
Oh yeah.
and I believe I posted it on Facebook.
With the ice cream.
No, not even with the ice cream. When you when you go to Walmart's website and you type in Juneteenth, and I'm sitting there like, you all didn't even bother to put these like Juneteenth and Black is Beautiful T-shirt designs on a black model.
Oh, I saw that.
Like, Becky was
ice cream to cool yourself down.
Becky was rocking the shirt real hard, and little Bobby had one on too. And I'm like,
Really, and it was disturbing.
it was
And
disrespectful.
all that
It
can
was
be fixed with
disturbing.
Photoshop.
That's all they do is Photoshop. Really, all they do is Photoshop them on the.
On
Like,
the thing.
they just switch out the shirt people, which is fine. I get it, but
I
you
get
couldn't make sure to be cognizant of putting
Right.
them on black bodies.
Black people. I'm like, and it was so disgusting. I was so mad.
So-
We're not even gonna talk about this ice cream.
So that
What was
goes
it?
back.
Was it fried chicken and watermelon flavor?
What?
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Are you serious? No, it wasn't. It was like red
It was
velvet.
a red velvet.
So that's what red
which
velvet.
they bid off of a black-owned ice cream
Exactly.
company.
Right, I read about that.
And
And then
people-
slapped the
Just
sticker
supporting
on it.
black businesses.
No, they didn't.
Ripping
They
them
should
off.
have.
No,
Like,
they didn't use their ice cream. They just stole the
They
flavor
stole the flavor
combination
and- yeah.
called it Juneteenth.
But this goes back to representation, right? Because in those rooms, when those decisions were made, there couldn't have been a black person in that room.
If it was, they should just say make it.
There couldn't have been a black person in the room because we would have said, wait a minute, let's get some black models up in here. Or even if you're going to use existing images and whatever you do, right? So representation is not there.
Honestly, I know where it's going to be commercialized. Anything
It's going to
black
be commercialized.
I'm a fan of Target because at least their commercialization is done by black artists.
And they have very diverse people in their commercials and their ads.
And they very
Because they know
much-
who's spending that money.
But if you go to like even their stores or their websites and you look at the items, it will say this is who this was designed by. This is like
Credit.
exactly, and they do that for Pride. I bet they do that for Latin American History Month. Like I can respect that you want to make money off us, but you at least respect us in the
Right.
process.
But
of doing so.
That's why I like Instagram, because Instagram has a lot of small black-owned businesses.
I know.
Is it?
We'll keep
It's a
it
good
moving. It's a
discussion.
good discussion, and we can be here all day.
Busy wilding out over here.
We just going. So, with all of that, I mean, and I'm not saying we're going to go overturn the government tomorrow.
No, that's what they leave to the other people because they're sorry.
We just yes.
Go ahead.
They tried.
But I think we're getting close to time. So, I love the good, healthy debate.
You can continue it next week if you're not finished.
Part two.
Part two? Well, you know what? We can pick it up next week. Talk a little bit more. I'd say this week, really just kind of sit in what it is, what freedom is for you, what that looks like, what we would like it to look like throughout the nation. If you get a chance, read the Declaration of Independence.
I have a little book my mother gave me many years ago. It has a whole Declaration of Independence.
I say read it through. We're gonna have homework.
Yes.
Read it. I like that they. I like the model that they give, and that's what I can really appreciate about this document, about this text. Is very clear that we have a problem. Clearly state all of your grievances, and boldly declares that we're not going to do this anymore, and saying no more. And for looking into areas of our life, not just within the nation, but things that we need to declare independence from within ourselves. So, with that, we're going to pause right here. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns, or emotional outbursts?
Nope.
I just want to ask, if possible, you touched on it briefly when you opened. Can we next week also discuss how this document is considered so sacred and has basically not evolved? And many of those patriots who follow that civil religion you talk about consider it untouchable. And that's dangerous because of when it was written and who it was written by and what their true intentions were when they wrote at that time. See, that's what he said in the beginning. So if we can dibble and dabble in that a little bit next week, it can be explosive. That was good. Let's get our hands together.